Welcome, Season Sixers. As always, thank you for being part of our Color Success podcast family. I'm your favorite host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Keep your eyes peeled for my brand new book coming out. It's called Cancel the Filter, where I share my experiences in the realm of mental health, both professionally and personally. Subscribe to colorsuccesspodcast.com to be on our waiting list. Seats are limited and being filled as we speak. We're also streaming on all your favorite platforms and socials. Whether you're on the go or comfy on the couch, you can tune in at your own comfort. As you know, we love growing discussions with our guests from our AAPI and minority communities. With so many friends and experts from different aspects of life, we love learning their stories and understanding what their success means to them. Let's get into it. I absolutely adore today's guest. Charlie Levin is the author of 6 books, including 4 Amazon #1 best-selling thrillers, The Not So Dead, Sam Sunborn series. Charlie is also the founder and publisher of the Munn Avenue Press. He and his team of book publishing and marketing experts help turn manuscripts into books and bestsellers, hopefully mine as well. For fun, Charlie is a highly ranked semi-professional poker player. Charlie, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, I'm delighted to be here.
Like I said, I absolutely adore you. We've worked together for a couple months and really wanted to get your take. You are one of the most interesting people because you've had so many different careers before publishing. So could you tell me your journey in terms of getting into publishing?
You asked that question, I look back and I think I've had 5 careers. That's about what the number is. But and then as I was thinking about your question, it all goes back to college when I got my degree in philosophy and ancient Greek.
Wow, that's very, I guess, random, but tell me your thinking behind that.
The philosophy part has stood me very well over the years because I like to see both sides of an issue or both people's perspective when looking at things. And your podcast isn't a whole lot about perspective and understanding, right?
Yes.
So from there, my wife, we used to get married young in those days.
I got married relatively young too in my day. So.
Convinced me I wouldn't make any money in philosophy. So I went to law school and decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. I spent a number of years actually building up a retail business, which I sold in 1995, just as the internet was peeking its head over the horizon. And I've always been a closet nerd. I did some programming and built an inventory system for that retail business. And the light went on. It was just as the World Wide Web was coming into existence. And I said, I just want to play in this game. No strategic plan. I just want to participate because it's just so enabling. And I started a little consulting company and we landed up growing that and doing applications for large corporations. We did work for the UN. One of my most interesting applications, we were programmers and marketers. We built a program for the American Refugee Committee.
Oh, wow.
To figure out how to collect situation reports in the field and get them to people because they had a big problem. Their volunteers were getting captured and killed. So we figured out a way, this is sort of pre-social media and how to communicate where the danger was and how to stay away from it. Mm-hmm. So, it's just an example of how enabling it is. I mean, we did a lot of e-commerce because I had a retail background. And so we did a number of jewelry sites, which are quite complex, and clothing and the miracle body jeans that stretch and make you look 10 pounds lighter. All that kind of
You've done
stuff.
it all. I was thinking like you were that early adopter category that we talked about in grad school. And then obviously the people that are lagging behind are laggers. And it makes total sense now why you are so on the pulse of social media and like current events. Totally, that brings everything together.
Yeah, I'm all over AI at the moment, which is a whole other subject. I gave a talk last week to a group about in sort of an introduction to AI, which I think is another big deal. It's an iPhone moment.
Yes.
It's not overhyped, but it's going to be messy and problems and all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, it's very cool. But that leads me to the publishing thing. I wound down my interest in the internet business about 10 years ago, and actually 12. And just like my transitions in other careers, you have these moments in life between careers where you can sort of look at where do you want to be and what do you want to do? And I always wanted to write a book. And I started writing Not So Dead, which is my first thriller. And the title, there's a little story behind the title, but and I always loved the thriller genre. And I believed if you can entertain people first, then you can mix in philosophical, moral
Yes.
quandaries and messages and have some fun with that too, as long as they're turning the page. That's the goal. Keep turning the page. So when that book was finally ready, and it probably took me 10 years to write that first book, because of interruptions and other things. It's very scary when you write your first book because you don't know what
Yes.
people are going to think, right? You're in that position right now.
Yes.
You've got a first book ready to go, almost ready to go.
Yes.
So when I put with Not So Dead, I actually had 9 agents interested in that manuscript. And there was one that I really liked because I believed she could sell it, which is the purpose of an agent. And then I asked her the question, assuming we get together and do this, how long is it going to take before that book sees the light of day? Now, you have to understand, I've been working on this for 10 years. So
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm kind of anxious and I'm a little older. So she said, well, the average is about 2 years. And I said, no, I don't have the patience for that. And with some help from some good friends in the book business, I self-published Not So Dead. And because I had an extensive background in sales and marketing, what I would do is write in the morning and sell and market the book in the afternoon. And to my delight, people liked the book. And it was an Amazon #1 bestseller. And that fear of writing, well, I got some really good reviews from the San Francisco Book Review and Kirkus and Steve Berry, who's a New York Times bestselling author. But when I got my first 5-star reader review from somebody who wasn't a friend or a relative, that was the seminal moment for me. That was like, okay, now you're a writer. And then when I finished the first book, I'm into quirky, snarky, funny characters who are on a mission. But I felt like I couldn't leave it there. I owed it to them to write the second book. And the second book came, it was a year, not 10 years, and everything flowed much. And the third and the fourth, in the middle of the fifth one now, but something else somewhat serendipitous happened, which is after the first few books did so well, a couple of my friends in the book business said, hey, we have a couple authors who could use some help. Would you work with them? So, as you know, some of the best things in life happen by happenstance. And I said, sure. And I found that I loved working with aspiring authors. And I got to meet these great people from all over the world, like you,
Yes.
who I wouldn't have met otherwise. And now we're working. Unfortunately, I have an author in Israel at the moment who is sad, but we have authors in Portugal, Ireland, the UK, the Netherlands, and of course, a lot in the US and a lot in California,
yes.
incidentally. Well, it's a big state. So, and now I have 14 people working with me, 2 editors, 2 proofreaders, 2 designers, a marketing manager, an assistant, and we're very busy. I think we're going to publish 2 to 3 books next week. So it's been happening, and I can't wait for Cancel the Filter, which is your upcoming book, and only a couple of weeks out, maybe. So
yeah. Well, I can't wait. And it makes a lot of sense because you said you like quirky people with, a mission. And I'm like, well, that's pretty much me. We got along right away. And I think that this is what the interesting part of the interview is it was serendipitous because I had this manuscript. I was talking to a traditional publisher about submission, and this ghostwriter just had contacted me before and and linked me to this publisher, and they wanted me to change. I'm 20 seconds from losing my shit to 20 seconds from losing my mind. And I said, God, it doesn't have the same punch, And so when we met, you accepted kind of who I am. And I think that is just so important when you're working with someone from an author's perspective. I'll get your take from publisher's perspective. But I think that is so important. And I'd like to add, you told me maybe a couple of weeks ago that in your most recent book, you put something online like, who would like to die in my books? And you said you had an overwhelming response of people that wanted to die in your books. So I was like, that is amazing in terms of interaction, right?
Well, yeah, and you're really great at that. Yeah, the subject line of the email was, "Who wants to be murdered in my next book?" And I was surprising number of volunteers, some of whom said, "No, I want to be in the book, but don't murder me." Funny ones like, "Can you murder my ex instead of me?" But yeah, email is a big deal for me. I have over 10,000 readers on my email list. I'm very engaged. I ask them questions and I get feedback. I share upcoming book covers with them and get their opinions, just like you did with your cover. Yeah, and that's fun. And I've had some remarkable stories, and some of them have become beta readers for me. And if you don't know, a beta reader is somebody who reads your book when it isn't quite done and gives you feedback. When a new book comes out, I have many people who are ready to review it and post reviews. And that's just, by the time you get to 7 books, the 2 that are not thrillers, one is a collection of short stories called The Last Appointment, which I really love because about a third of it is kind of personal memoir, and a third is fiction, a third is essay. And then the 6th book is a children's book called No Hugo and His Basketball, written with the help of my 2 8-year-old twin grandsons who helped me come up with the story, and they love basketball. So that's what started it off.
And that's the great thing, is that you have a variety of interests like most people. And so I guess I wonder how you can communicate to the audience. How do you really choose how to hone in on your interests when you're writing a manuscript or writing a series? Because those are 2 different things. And you've told me, but maybe you can share why that children's book was so important for you to write.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of reasons. The way that book came about is my kids live in California. I live in New Jersey. And usually on a Sunday morning, we'll get on a video call together. And they'll read me a story or I'll read them a story. And this one particular Sunday morning, I didn't have a book in front of me. And I said, let's play a game. And the game is I'll start the story and then you go next and we'll take turns. And they were about to go off to basketball practice. So I said, there's a boy who really, really loves basketball. And then they would fill in the blank. And then I'd said, and the basketball got loose and started rolling down the streets of San Francisco, which leads to this whole crazy adventure. And we went back and forth. And I was so inspired by the end of the phone call that I had to write it all down. My grandsons are mixed race, so there is also my desire for the kids out there that are like my grandkids to have a book that appeals to them, that's about them. And it's just baked into the way it is, and it's a really fun story. I mean, the ball rolls through down Lombard Street.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
Cars and past Ghirardelli Square and then lands up in the bay, and they have to figure out how to get it out of the bay. And it's also a father and son love story. So it was just a work of passion. So when you ask the question, well, how do you decide what to do? I think you have to have a passion for it, like you have for your book. You have to have, that fire that's going to get you through it. Now, the children's book's not that long, but my thrillers are 80,000 words long.
Yeah.
And you have to have a reason to write every day or almost every day and keep going until you get done. And then when I was in the middle of writing my first book, I went to a conference in New York and I heard John Sanford, who's best-selling author, speak. And he said, when I finish writing the first draft, I probably go back and rewrite 15 to 20 times. And I was like, what? I mean, I'm struggling to finish this first draft. But when I got done with it, it was like 15 to 20 times.
It makes a lot of sense.
Changing and fixing. You've been down through
Yes.
that process now too. And you have to really want to do it. You have quite a great message and story to tell. I think I did too, and the spark of Not So Dead is in that title. There's some irony in that. Like, how can you be, I thought that was a black and white thing. How can you be dead and not dead? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I like titles with a hook.
It's very philosophical. I will loop that back.
Right. Yes, there is a chapter on Schrodinger's cat, which is a yes and no, but yeah. And this inspiration for that book was I had read an article maybe 12 years ago or 11 years ago, how Google was investing billions of dollars in digitizing your brain so you could live forever.
Oh, wow.
Now, what thriller authors do with stuff like that is they say, oh, what could go wrong with that?
Oh, nothing. But
yeah. that was the basis of the book. And then of course the characters just appeared. I write mostly fiction. And it was a revelation to me when I started writing. I'd finish a session and they'd say, oh, where did that character come from? How did that villain get so evil? And in writing fiction or being creative, even, you're really drawing from your subconscious or your unconscious mind. It's like Hemingway said, write drunk and edit sober.
I love that. And it's very Freudian if you think about it, because I used to think, many years ago, well, even now, you have Squid Game and all that, and you're like, man, something really messed up is happening in that person's mind. But really, it is an artistic expression of some of these ideas. And just looping back to your grandson's stories, what really sold me, and you weren't even trying to sell me, I approached you and I really wanted to get to know you and see if this was a good fit, is when you said, you might ask yourself why an old white man what he would know about an Asian American woman's story. And that just completely sold me because you acknowledged your privilege and you talked about the elephant in the room, because central to my book is part of my identity, right? And so that in itself was beautiful to share about your mixed race grandchildren and how you were really trying to create a better world for all of us to feel accepted. And so when I think about this is a nice segue into the process of, so many people talk to me and ask me, well, how do you become a published author? I was like, I'll tell you when it happens, which it'll happen pretty soon. But I would like to talk to the expert, right? Of like, it is a very long process. And if you're not doing it with a team or people that you trust, it could become very, very arduous. So I guess the first step in the process is, I mean, obviously writing a manuscript, stuff like that. But some people just pitch books and ideas. It's a crowded space. So how does one even decide, okay, I would like to write a book, and how do you choose that method of publication?
Yeah, because I went through that process and that quandary. And even a year later, when I wrote my second book, I went back to that same agent I liked and we talked about it again. And then I realized, oh, it's going to be another couple of years. But by the time I did my third and fourth book, I realized that the traditional publishers now don't invest a lot in marketing your book, and they take a big chunk of the royalties.
Yes.
They expect the author to market the book, or have a social media presence or an email list and do that. So it was like, and unless you're James Patterson or Michelle Obama, they're not going to put a lot of power behind it.
Yep.
So I actually I've had traditionally published authors get their rights back. One of them, this is a Pulitzer Prize winning author, Catherine Ellison, wonderful book called Buzz, about she and her son and attention deficit disorder. Mm-hmm. And she's really become kind of an expert on it. But she got the rights back from the traditional publisher. We redesigned the cover, redid the interior, new preface, fixed it up, and she's doing much better with us versus the traditional publisher that didn't really pay much attention to it. And I've got several like that. So now I'm firmly in the camp of doing it the way we're doing it. Plus, I know all the pitfalls and traps. And I mean, I do have some authors that, figure, oh, I'm going to do this by myself. And Amazon tries to make it look like this is a user-friendly experience. It is not. And I've had a friend recently who came to me after everything got mucked up and said, can you help me straighten everything out? Which we're doing. We're almost done.
Yeah. And I think that's really an important point, is that self-publishing doesn't necessarily mean you're doing everything by yourself. And that's why your company is just so helpful, because you do have marketing specialists, proofreaders, editors, and designers behind you and beside you. And that is so, so important when you're making all of these decisions and you're getting real-time feedback on your work.
Well, yeah. And my premise going into this was, when I decided on book number one that on Not So Dead, I wanted it to look and read better than a traditionally published book would look. So the cover I had professionally designed, the interior professionally done, a really good editor, a really good proofreader. I hired these people because these were their skills. And then, being the nerdy part, I figured out how to manipulate Amazon and Ingram, who we published to non-Amazon sites with, and made mistakes and learned from those mistakes too. And And then marketing, anyone who knows anything about marketing, a lot of it is trial and error. Find what works. If it works, do more of it. If it doesn't work, either jettison it or change it and do it again, right? Especially for those who depend on social media, you know what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. When you figure out what works, you try and do more of it. And that was true with us with ads. I wasted a lot of money, for example, on Facebook ads that I got lots of likes and comments, but we do other things on Amazon. I have a PR guy that calls me the Amazon whisperer because we've cracked the code in a sense on how to get sales for independent publishers. Mm-hmm.
So yeah. you mentioned that you went to a lit agent, and I think that's another big question is that people think I need a lit agent to shop my book and get me into one of these traditional publishers. And obviously, even if you get in, what you're saying is like the timeline is so long, but what are the pros and cons of hiring a lit agent?
Well, they're the gatekeepers for most of the traditional publishing houses. Most of them won't even talk directly to an author. So the agents, the reason they rely on the agents is they do serve a purpose. They know how to take a book and make it fit. If they like the book and have a passion for it, and there may be one agent who loves your book and another one who hates it. Steve Berry, who I mentioned, who blurbed my first book, had 118 rejections before he finally got a publisher. And that's fine. That worked out for him. I mean, he sold 20 million books or something. So, great. But I think the average writer can do as well or better and keep 100% of their royalties by independently publishing. So, and I'm agnostic. I mean, if it works for a particular author to find a traditional publisher, great. And there's a few that are reputable that will take submissions, like Kensington is a publisher that will take direct submissions. That's a good name. There's a few, but most of them will rely on the agent because they would be overwhelmed. You just can't handle the volume of it.
Yes.
And we get a lot, even though we charge for our services. We're turning down books for various reasons. My number one criteria for working with an author is, can I help them be successful? Mm. If I can't help them meet their goals, because as you know, the first thing I asked you in our conversation is, what are your goals? If I can't help them meet your goals, I won't do it. I mean, I read a novel recently. It just wasn't ready. It just wasn't at that point, and the author was ready to pay us to do it. And I said, no, I won't do it. I had another one from very passionate man who was a climate change denier. I'm sorry, I'm not going to help you spread that message.
Oh my.
I'm just not going to, help. So I do draw the line for various reasons.
That conversation was a blur to me, aside from, just really feeling, for me, a feeling and a vibe is really important, especially as a psychologist, as to like, can I work with this person? Because what drew me to you actually was the results driven and oriented copy that you had on your website. And of course, I know copy is copy, and then you meet the person and you have to feel that out. And that was what really drew me to you and to your team, because just such wonderful and warm people that really do believe in the authors they select. So, you mentioned, can I help you reach your goals? But what would make a manuscript stand out to you that says, this is really ready to start moving forward in the process?
Well, one of the things I look for, and this applies to fiction and nonfiction, and I use this term with you too, is if the writer has a voice. Mm. And what does that mean? Because it's kind of a fuzzy term, but I think it has to do with authenticity and a connection. When you read their work, you say, yeah, they're for real. That's real. Even in fiction, it's coming from somewhere in the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I like what I'm reading and I want to read more. It's funny. I heard an interview recently with R.L. Stine, who wrote the Goosebump book.
Goosebumps. Mm-hmm.
And when I wrote my children's book, I'm in a writers group, which is another good thing for writers to do. It's almost like a study group in law school, which I learned about. Um, who read the book and said, I don't see the moral at the end of the book. And I said, well, there's lots of positivity in there, but and R.L. Stine was asked the same question, is there a moral in the Goosebump books? And he says, my only goal is to get them to turn the page.
Mm.
So your book has to be good enough that I want to turn the page. Whatever your message is, fiction, nonfiction, if I don't want to turn the page, I'm not going to read the book. So that's important. So voice, yep. Make me want to continue to read. If you have a good message, that's really kind of important. If I'm going to feel good reading your book in the end, if I'm going to learn something, I love reading fiction where I learn something. So in my books, there's a lot of things going on that are real and happening today that most people don't know about. I even have an appendix in the end with links to all the stuff I refer to. And which a number of people really like. They go and they figure it out. What's he talking about? So yeah, that's what appeals to me. And then overall, in publishing books, I have an overarching litmus test, which is, can I be proud of publishing this book? Is it a book I can be proud of? And certainly authors want to be proud of their books, right?
Oh, yeah.
I want to be proud. I'm going to attach my name to it. I want to be proud of it too. And there's really a lot out there. I mean, we're very busy. We have stuff coming in every day. So that, I understand why agents exist, because they filter it out, and we filter it out. We read what comes in and we talk to the authors. And if we like what we read, and, as you said, I felt a connection right away when you and I talked. From my consulting days, besides being successful for our clients, and in this case, our authors, a big thing for me is, am I going to like working with this person?
That's in general. Like, I feel like that is so important that people need to understand. It's like, I think, especially when people are thinking they're paying for someone's services, that, they should take them. And I'm like, when you are looking for a therapist or a provider, really shop around, because you really have to feel comfortable with sharing some of these very difficult topics. And, also, though, the provider in private practice doesn't have to just take you because they're wanting to make money off of you. There is a certain relationship piece that really needs to be there. And similar, can I help this person? Do I have the bandwidth to take on this person with these presenting concerns? A lot of people in private practice really limit the clients that they take, unfortunately or fortunately. And others may have different circumstances that they're like, I really can't, handle multiple crises day after day, just given, maybe I have a family or something like that. So
or different personality types.
Absolutely.
And to me, life is short. You should like what you do and the people that you work with. That's a key criteria for the people that I've hired for Mun Avenue Press, is that they be really likable, both both for me and for our clients, that people really like working with them. The skills, they have skills, but you can teach skills. I don't think you can really teach personality and likability very much. So
I try like teaching them, but it is really difficult. And it's one of those skills that are very subjective and qualitative. And, we have social skills classes, but I think it is hard to capture that sometimes, that likability piece. I mean, I don't want to open up too many cans of worms right now, but I do want to ask, because you're always ahead of the trends, in terms of, you see technology booming, you see, e-commerce booming. Those are things that you were doing way before Amazon e-commerce exploded. So we talked briefly about AI. How do you think that's going to impact the publishing business, the writing business at this point in time?
well, yeah, it's a big question, but I'll try and keep
Yes.
it short. Um, I think it's a tool, and it's an amazing tool. It does not replace creative writers. If you go to my author website, which is charleslevin.com, and look at my blog, I did some experimenting with AI. I had it write a story about a clinical drug trials intake form for Alzheimer's drug.
Hmm.
And I said, make it funny, and it did. And so, sarcastic and all the things that could go wrong. And I showed it to some well-known authors, and they found it astounding. But the writing that AI can do is two-dimensional. Where it was helpful to me is, like, I wrote a short story on a flight back from San Francisco. I wrote half a short story, and then I fed it into ChatGPT and said, give me some suggestions for what happens next. It couldn't write the story, but it could say, well, maybe this happens, maybe that. It's a brainstorming tool.
Sure.
And then when I was done, I said, give me 10 titles for this short story. And I liked one of them, and I varied it a little bit. So for writers, it can be a great tool. And I think what you're seeing now in schools, the first reaction in schools was, let's ban AI, right? The enlightened schools are now saying, let's teach the kids how to use AI. It's just like when I was younger, and I don't know, you're younger, a lot younger than I am, but when calculators came along, they were banned in schools,
Mm-hmm.
right? Even when the first word processor came along by Wang Computer, people thought it was cheating to be able to search and replace and not use carbon paper.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the educational cycle will come around, and we'll use these tools to accelerate what we can do. There's a great quote from Steve Jobs that always comes back to me with the PC. He said the PC is like the bicycle of the mind.
Hmm.
Well, think about that. You're pedaling, it's your energy, but you're more efficient and you're going faster. Well, I think AI is maybe the motorcycle of the mind. It can really help you accelerate and get there, but it's still you, it's still your creativity. And at least as of now in fiction, AI doesn't get things like subtext and nuance. It's very two-dimensional. Whereas good writing goes much deeper than that. So I have less fear and more optimism, although just like there's abuse on social media, there's chances for abuse.
Absolutely.
But on balance, the internet's been a good thing, right? And a big thing. And social media, when used the way you use it, is a very positive thing, and the way I use it.
I think, again, similar to the internet, it does come down to caregiver regulation with children and kids. And, they're coming up with counter AI cheating things. So you're not just spitting in some information about this world history project or something like that. But just like Wikipedia, it's the same thing, right? People would copy and paste Wikipedia and like turn it in as a paper. And, so I agree with you in that there are going to be countermeasures developed. There's quite a bit of money, I imagine, in creating things that detect that in terms of the cheating piece and all that. But I also agree with you that you can't really take the humanity and put it in like ChatGPT, just similar to how I feel about therapy. We can have all these tools, these didactics, these videos to discuss, and even podcasts, but it doesn't really replace kind of that human interaction that you have with the therapist. It is a tool to help more and more people. So if people want to work with you, I know you're already bombarded, but where can people purchase your books and find out more about your publishing company?
Sure. So for those would-be authors out there, I'd love to hear from you. It's Munn, MUNN, avenuepress.com. Some people ask me where that name Munn Avenue came from. I happen to grow up on that street. That's where
Okay.
And my books, my author website for readers is Charles Levin, Lev as in Victor, IN.com. And there's a lot of stuff on there, free short stories, blogs. And then if you are interested in just going to Amazon, search on Not So Dead and it'll come right up. Another thing I know about things like picking titles is I want them to be unique.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought the domain names, notsodead.com, and all the domain names for all my books. I made sure they were unique so that they would come up in Amazon searches. It's sort of part of the technique. Amazon is more like Google than it is like Walmart. It's a search engine. That box at the top,
Yes,
it's what it's all about. And their algorithms are like Amazon. So yeah, MunnAvenuePress.com, CharlesLevin.com, Not So Dead on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's all over the place. Yeah, so if you want to publish a book, contact me that way. If you want to read a book, love to have more readers. There's a contact us on both of those websites to get a hold of me if you want to.
Who knows? You could die in Charlie's next book.
That too. I've done that twice with my last two books, and I used over 20 names of people that volunteered in my last book, and they got a big kick out of it. They were thrilled.
Thank you so much, Charlie, for sharing all your knowledge, and again, just adore you. So thank you for spending your Friday with me.
Same here, Stephanie. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm very excited about your upcoming book.
Thank you. Tune in next week for my interview with Julianne Taylor-Shore, the author of Setting Boundaries That Stick: How Neurobiology Can Help You Rewire Your Brain to Feel Safe, Connected, and Empowered. We talk about cultural context in setting boundaries, what to do when a relationship ends after setting boundaries, and how practice makes progress.